Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. You know what I like to do on my show? I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about your ancestors. Now, I know many people talk about those who have come before them, and perhaps you are a part of a culture that does that. Not everyone does. So if you don't, you are in for a treat today. You are going to learn perhaps a new way of introducing a tradition into your life, into the life of your family. For those of y'all who look at ancestors as a very important part of your life, then you know what I'm going to say. Come on, let's get comfy, let's get cozy. We are about to get started because my guest today is Dr. Joice Bailey Lewis, and we are talking about her book, My Ancestral Voice. I love that title. Good morning, Dr. Joice. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Good morning.
I love the title of your book, but before we get started, I always take the time to introduce my guests to perhaps those listeners who are unfamiliar with your work or unfamiliar with you as an author. So the first question is, Dr. Joice, what makes you Joice? What makes you you?
I am a person who has gone through everything that life could throw at her and survived. And that makes me me.
I like that. You know, so many times we run into people that do not have a survivor mentality. They don't have a survivor personality. And life can really weigh them down, and you can see them starting to lose their sense of hope, their sense of joy. So I'm so glad that you have that keep going attitude, that you are a person who believes that there's always hope in the next step. That is so incredibly important. Now, with that being said, have you always wanted to be an author, or did you find that that was just the next logical step along your life path?
Well, Dr. Angela, I am a storyteller, and I tell stories about things that actually happened, people that are in my book, and those, of course, I have other stories as well. But I talk about people who did things to survive and to make sure that 5 generations later on, I could keep on doing what I do and still hold my head up and not let anybody define me. What we learned from our ancestors, in my case especially, was that starting out with my great-grandfather as a slave, and then finding that he, a few years after slavery, was able to found a church. And that church is still functioning today. It's on the back cover of my book. And it is still functioning today with people who have come a long ways through starting out as slaves or as sharecroppers, which my family did, starting out at 8 years old, which I did, working in the cotton fields, and yet having an extremely high IQ and being able to understand that I was not inferior to anyone and that I could hold my head up, and it might take me longer to get something done as it did with my doctorate. It took me 27 years when it should only have taken me 5 or 6. But I knew I was a black person who had to struggle, and I did what I needed to do. And seeing that in the young people today, they're doing what they need to do. And even going back to the time of Martin Luther King, where people were willing to go to jail, who used to be afraid of jail, but they were willing to do that. They were willing to get beaten and treated like the slaves had been treated, but still standing up for what they believed in and still marching and making sure that the world knew that they were here and that they weren't going to be denied. And that has been my life's work. And I wanted to write this book to let people know how it was and how it still is in some ways.
Yes, ma'am. And I can definitely give a nod to that, in that it is so important that we do not forget the importance of the steps of our ancestors and all that they have done to enable us to be able to get to where we are today. Yes, ma'am, I agree with you on that. Now, the title of your book, My Ancestral Voice, it seems like it's something that would have come to you quite easily, but sometimes people have a hard go at deciding upon the title for their book. When it came to titling your book, how did the title come to you? Did it come first and then you wrote the book around it? Did you write and then the title kind of came out of your writings, or did you stick with the topic? How did you decide the title of your book?
Well, let me read the first paragraph of my prologue, and you will see how it came about. Fog swirled and rose in spirals around the gravestones where my ancestors had lain for over 100 years. It was as though the souls of friends and families rose from their graves and mingled together, greeting one another as if they were talking over the garden fence. They marveled over their survival, their triumph, their trials, and they recounted many exploits that invoked tears and laughter down through the years, while streams of sunlight pierced the surrounding forest, warming the morning dew. I had come in the morning to commune with my ancestors and to draw strength from their stories and their lives. And that's where it began.
I love it. I love it. Now, so many times when we're writing, there's a particular message that we want to make sure that the reader of the book leaves with. When they get to that last page, they have heard the message over and over again. What is the message that you wanted to explain to the reader or share with the reader of your book?
Well, again, at the end of my book, I share the entire history of the church that my great-grandfather started. Now, and in the end, I know that I have told the stories. There are 112 stories in my book. I know that I have told the stories, and each story is told the way it happened and with the idea that others can make up their minds about what it means to them. And I tell my ancestors in my last paragraph, hushed. Hushed was my father's voice, and he was my last ancestor. Hushed were my ancestral voices. Sleep and rest, my ancestors. Your voices have been heard and your stories have been told. And I say that as I sit in the silent morning and pray my childhood prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep. And at the end, the voices of my ancestors joined me in prayer. Amen. Amen.
I love it. I love it. Now, what is your message to explain the racial divide? We're talking about that right now all across the globe. The pandemic is going on, sure, But the death of George Floyd especially has shone a light on what Black people have been talking about for quite a long time. What is your message to help explain the divide, the racial divide, especially here in the U.S.?
You know, it's unfortunate that there are still people in the United States right now who do not know about slavery and the impact it had on the people. I had several people tell me. One woman said, I couldn't understand what you were writing because she didn't have a repertoire of information that gave her anything to lean on when she was trying to understand how we were treated. I have a friend who said he cried when he realized that he was a poor white boy from Kansas, but there was a total difference from being a poor white boy and a poor black girl, because the difference was so stark and so devastating that he cried. So, unfortunately, there are people today who do not understand how this all came about, and the fact that a people, a whole race of people, were put under the service of another race of people and beaten and killed and raped and treated with every atrocity you can imagine in order to keep them down and keep them working in the fields. We've come through all of that, and it was all about there's a superior and an inferior people. Now, God never made us inferior and superior, but that's what was necessary in order to keep the black people down and make them believe with such a slave mentality that they were supposed to be down and the whites were supposed to be over them. That is not what was intended, but that was what was necessary in order to be able to have an economy of riches for some and slavery for others. That's where it started in this country. Of course, it goes all the way back, which I won't talk about, but it started here in this country. Now, we have people of slave mentality who still exist. They don't, the whites don't know why, and blacks either, don't know why they've got this divide. They were raised on both sides to believe in the slave mentality. And then because of that, the white people still think that some white people, now I know the group is getting smaller and smaller, but they're still there. And they believe that they have a right to be superior over people. And they haven't earned it. They haven't worked for it. They haven't done anything but been given privileges in order to be able to succeed where others fail. And the black people, some of us think that we're supposed to be behind. We aren't supposed to have. My father was like that. My father's an intelligent man, beautiful man, and everybody loved him. But he believed that some things were just too good for blacks, and they were like white things. And I had to teach him the difference, that we all, by our struggles and our works, can become whatever it is we choose to become. He said to me, you don't need to go to college. Here I am with an IQ that's off the chart. You don't need to go to college. And by the way, we took an IQ test in our city back in the 50s, and a black boy had the highest IQ in the city, and I had the second highest IQ in the city. And I wasn't even allowed to read books out of the city library, and yet I had next to the highest IQ. And when I looked at my father, who said, go out and work for these two people, I said, I can't do that because I've been teaching school. I became a substitute teacher when teachers couldn't teach me anything else. I've been teaching school. I can't go out there. And he said, well, I can't send you to college. And everybody was saying, you have to go to college. You're so smart. but I couldn't go because I didn't have any money to go until we came to California. My fiance and I came to California, where education was nearly free under Governor Brown. And that's how we got an education. Took me 27 years to get a doctorate, but I got it because I knew it belonged to me. And the day I walked across the stage with to get my diploma, I said I will never have to pick cotton again.
I love it. I love it. Yes, I can definitely understand how that makes all the difference in the world. You cannot hold someone back when they are destined for greatness. I love it. It is time for us to go to break, but before we do, if you could please, can you remind everyone what is the title of the book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact?
Well, the title of the book is called My Ancestral Voices. It can be purchased on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles. And you can keep in contact with Dr. Lewis on Facebook. The publishing company is Page Publishing. You can also contact her through Page Publishing.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I want to do? I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you. And today we are talking about family. In fact, we are talking about the power of our ancestors. My guest today is Dr. Joice Bailey Lewis. And we're talking about her book, My Ancestral Voices. So go on, get comfy again, because we have much more to talk about. Dr. Joice, my next question for you is talking about Black success. We succeed in various ways and in different things that we do. Success doesn't always look like, a shiny object, a fancy car, a fancy house, or anything. Sometimes success is the education that we were able to gain that perhaps another family member was not able to gain. So with that being said, what is your message to Black people to succeed and to help them view racism through a different lens?
Well, I believe that Black people have succeeded from back when we used to run away from slave owners and make it to the north and then go back and get other people and make it again. That we succeeded at that. But I look at people today and with the shining eyes and the kinds of will that we have, and I think that we have to grow that part of us to believe in ourselves and not to think that we are less than anyone, but to think that we all, by, as Martin Luther King said, by our be known by our character and not by the color of our skin. Our color of our skin is just unique to us. It has nothing to do with nothing. It's who we are that makes us be able to succeed at life and make this country back into what it should be. Now, I talked a little bit about the slave mentality earlier. We have to get rid of that, and we have to say that nobody tells us who we are. We are who we are by what we do, not by the standards that someone else set for us. But there is this whole notion that we have to fight against the other race when it comes to getting ahead, going to school, getting an education, having good schools that raise our children's standards as high as anybody else's standards are. we are guilty sometimes ourselves of allowing ourselves to be subjected to inferior schools and inferior jobs and inferior social standards. Sometimes we're guilty of letting ourselves, that happen to us ourselves. Other times we are caught up in this whole scheme that happened back during slavery, and we're still living it. There's one other thing that we have to help with, and it's not us, but it's whites who live in fear that from day one, back during slavery, that the slaves were going to rise up and kill everybody in the night. There is still that fear. And you saw that with the little woman, the man and woman, who had the guns and waving it at the people on the streets. You see that with the police who put their knees on the neck of a black man. We saw that when I was growing up. I'm 84 years old, so I've seen a lot. Back when Emmett Till was killed, all of that was because we got to get rid of the black man because we were afraid that he will come after us. Well, I just wanted to tell the whites, we're not coming after you. We've got too much work to do for ourselves and for our children and to take care of our elderly. We are busy. And we're not taking the time to come over to your house and do anything to you. Stop worrying about that. Go ahead and become our neighbor so you don't scream epithets over the garden wall because there's a black man living over there. Stop being afraid and start being our neighbor.
Ooh, I love that. Stop being afraid and start being our neighbor. Oh my goodness, because doesn't the word remind us to love your neighbor as yourself? I love that, Dr. Joyce. Now,
that's right.
I love what you are saying and the direction that your book takes us in. I am the granddaughter of someone born in the greatest generation who helped fight for those of you that were in the silent generation as my father was. And my mother is a baby boomer. I am a Gen Xer. So to see how each generation has built upon the last generation, as the granddaughter of what was then referred to as a Negro lawyer who fought for the desegregation of the various places and spaces, I've heard so many of the stories. Though I may not have witnessed it myself, I know these things to be true. So I would like for, if you can, share with us, what do you think are some of the things that we can do to help to continue to walk down the path to make sure that we don't go back to a segregated America, that we don't allow white supremacy to raise its ugly head again? How do we overcome or continue to overcome such a heavy part of our history?
We saw a glimmer of hope when Obama became president. But, sometimes when it happens one time, it's lost in history. But it happened again. Mm-hmm. Now we have Kamala Harris, who's the vice president. We have to keep on ascending this ladder of human endeavor, one rung at a time. And sometimes we go up one rung and go back two. But we've got to come at it again and not allow any generation to leave without having made a difference. We are strong. We're stronger than we think we are. because we've just found out that the black vote will either make or break you. Mm-hmm. Black women will carry you across the finish line if you're hanging there with us. Now, you see what a lot of people don't realize is that even the South, during slavery, you know who ran the country? White men and black women. Mm-hmm. Very few steps other than, let's say, the voting, the women's right to vote for white women, was done by white. It was the black woman who raised the babies and cooked the meals and determined how the household went. And it was the white man who got out and did the business part of living. But the black woman taught the children and made the household run. Now, what we've done over the years, since we're no longer in the kitchens, we have lost track of who's been in charge. Now we're finding it out again. Now, I'm not saying that black women are to end all, but I'm saying that women in general, all women, and we see this now with the marching, we see the women in the front, out there on the firing line, and those mothers who got together and made a line to protect the marchers. That's what I'm talking about. Now, here I am, 84 years old, but I figure I have to keep my hand in until God calls me home.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I have my daughter helps me, but I have my YouTube presentation once a week. And I'm talking to you, and I'm writing my book, and I have written children's books so that children can see how it was back in the day.
And
those are the kinds of things that will make us whole. Those are the kinds of things that will take us across the finish line. And we have to get in this line and start marching. And anybody who stands in our way, if they have done criminal things to put their foot on our neck, we have to take them through the legal system just like anybody else who murdered somebody, because black lives matter.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, they do. And, for anyone who says that all lives matter, we must add that all lives cannot matter until black lives matter.
I like that. All lives cannot matter until black. And I want to put on the end of that, black lives matter too.
That's right. That's right. I love it. I love it. It is time for us to go to break. But before we do, if you could please, can you remind everyone what is the title of the book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact?
Well, the title of the book is called My Ancestral Voices. It can be purchased on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles. And you can keep in contact with Dr. Lewis on Facebook. The publishing company is Page Publishing. You can also contact her through Page Publishing.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I want to do? I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you. And today we are talking about family. In fact, we are talking about the power of our ancestors. My guest today is Dr. Joice Bailey Lewis, and we're talking about her book, My Ancestral Voices. So go on, get comfy again, because we have much more to talk about. So Dr. Joice, my next question for you is, what can anyone do who wants to heal the nation? We have gone through slavery, we've gone through Reconstruction, we've gone through Jim Crow, we've gone through the Civil Rights Movement. We are now into the Me Too and the Black Lives Matter. We're talking about making sure that every voice counts. What can we do as a nation to help make sure that we continue? Do you think that it just continue to do what we're doing, continue to have a voice? Is there one thing, or do you think there's several things?
There was an old song that used to say, "Get up off your rusty dusty." That's it. That's what we all have to do. Stand up and be counted. I was very impressed with President Obama, and I still call him president because I don't think we've had one since. But President Obama talked about how we're going to have to move forward and gave us some directions as to how we're going to move forward. I was in South Africa some years ago and went around to seeing all of the displays where they had made changes and had come through Mandela becoming president. And I was so impressed, and it's similar to what Obama was saying. I was so impressed with how they had done it. Tutu had sat for days, and people had come before him, and he had forgiven them for their atrocities. He had forgiven them. And those who didn't want to be part of it didn't get to be forgiven. But they forgave people who had treated them the same way we were treated here in America. We haven't done that here. We haven't come to a point where we have laid out what man's inhumanity to man was and how we can move past it. We are still in the throes of some people who still think they're better than others, some people who still think they're less than others. We are still in the throes of that. Now, so you ask, what can we do? Let me say that my dream was to be, from 4 years old, was to become a teacher. And that was my calling. When I realized between 3 and 4 that I already knew how to read, and don't know where I learned it, I have no idea. But at 9 months, I was able to count. Couldn't talk, but I could count. So when I realized all of these things, I said, I want to pass on to somebody else what I know. And so I became an educator. Took me so long to do it that I almost forgot what my plan was, but I became an educator. I became a mother of 3 children and put forth every effort to help them understand what the struggle was. My daughter says she used to go with the little imaginary violin, but she said, Mother, I did that, but I was joking, she said, because I was learning from everything you said. And she said, and that is how I'm able to live my life, because she taught me. And that's what I want to be. And for some reason, Dr. Angela, for some reason, God gave me the ability to fix anything in education that was broken. I went to Alabama at the top of my game, and before you knew it, now I'm back where they denied me education, but I'm back where I know that there are some children just like me who need somebody to understand what they're going through and to give them a chance to get on the other side, and that's what I did. I turned schools around, I turned districts around, I turned organizations around, and when I got them turned around, said, thank you very much, I'm going home now. because I was in my 60s and my 70s. I was 74 years old and was running a school district here in California at 74. But God gave me the strength to walk in my high-heel shoes and to be good at what I did.
I love it.
So that's what I'm saying. People are going to have to be good at what they do. They're going to have to make a difference. You can't sit at home and on your rusty dusty and do nothing, because there's so much work to be done that if we all did our very best and made the biggest difference in the world, it still would not be enough. We still would have a long ways to go, and that is what we're going to have to do.
Yes, ma'am. Speaking of young people, what advice do you have for our young people when it comes to, many of them are in the streets right now. They're telling people we need to re-look what's going on in our schools when it comes to the shooters coming into the school and all of that they want to feel safe when they're in school. They're making a voice known that their voice matters, even though they may be younger, but they have something to say as well. They're trying to be, I think, who we've taught them to be, and love each other and to be your best. Even though they look a little different, I think they're trying to be heard. Yes, ma'am.
They're trying to be heard. And so what you do is you listen. You listen to them. And on several occasions, I've had schools where school boards have come and said to me, would you come and help us? Would you come and fix us? Because the state is about to take over, because we are destroyed. We have allowed the principals and the people to destroy our schools. Come and fix us. And so I go in, and the first thing I do is I call in the parents. And I say to them, what does it look like now? What would it look like if you fixed everything? What would that look like? And once we get that down and agreed upon, then that becomes our vision. That is where we want to take this thing. We start from the beginning as to where we are, and we know where we want to take it. And what we do within that, in the scope of all of that, is that our aim is to teach children to learn for themselves. I don't call teachers teachers. I believe that teachers are the leaders of the pack. And they then put out the information that is going to be necessary for kids to succeed. And you teach them how to get it. Teach them how to learn. I remember one school where everybody was on different pages. I was the principal, and I taught teachers every Thursday from 8 to 4. Didn't even have lunch, because they were coming on their planning periods, and I taught them how to teach kids, who kids were. They're not little adults. They are people who have a shorter duration of existence on this earth. They don't know what the people who've been around for 30 years should know. They are struggling to get the information that will stand them in good stead when the storms come, when the troubles come, when I need to be able to represent myself. What is it I need to know, and what is it I need to be able to do? Teach kids. In 3 months, in every place I've ever been, I give myself 3 months. In 3 months, no matter how torn up this school is, or how behavior disordered the children were in one of my schools today, they were all in a behavior home. And they came to me. And when in 3 months, I put both them and the other school, the big high school that had been torn up, put them in shape to listen. So, yeah, I got their attention. And I got their attention through caring, through listening, through what I used to say, come walk with me. And I'd hold a hand of the big boy taller than me, and I'd say, take my hand and walk with me. And in that walking, we would talk about his needs, not mine, his needs, and what he needed out of life to be able to have some peace in his soul. And when we would get to the end of our walk, we would have made me understand some things and he understood. This particular school, the kids came around to where they were quiet. They were all in class. I had 1,200 students, and there were weeks when nobody was absent. There were weeks when nobody was late. And there were weeks when we did not have, there were months when we didn't have any fights on our campus. It was quiet, it was peaceful, and the kids knew that they were loved and they knew that they were safe.
Mm-hmm. And doesn't that make a world of difference? Well, Dr. Joice Lewis, I want to say thank you so much for coming and spending time with us today. That is a beautiful way to end my time with me. A great title for another book, Come and Walk with Me. That love that you gave to them, I think they probably still remember that to this day. I know that I have educators in my life that I remember because they made such a profound difference in my world. Thank you again, Dr. Joice, for spending time with us. I know for a fact that you have enlightened, inspired, and empowered every listener today. Thank you again for spending time with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm always willing to talk and to train teachers or to consult with school districts or anyone who needs help. I'm here for you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you again. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us this morning as well. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend it here with us. We thank you for doing that. We hope again that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you, but more importantly, that you remember that God's grace and mercy shines upon you each and every day. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.